That was Dark Star by Daniel Chartrand. If you've been keeping up with my episodes of this podcast so far, you'll probably recognize the name Daniel Chartrand. I've featured a few of his pieces so far on these podcasts, so that's pretty cool. I've got one more that I'll be featuring on a future episode. So there is definitely room for other musicians to get their work featured at the beginning of my podcast. Definitely. If you know someone or if you are yourself a musician, feel free to send me a link to your stuff or a place where I can download your MP3s so that I can feature them on the podcast and give you full credit and get you some exposure. But anyway, let's go back to the beginning here. Episode 10 of the Midnight Writer podcast. I am ES Win. This is our 10th episode, and got all kinds of interesting stuff going on. Thunder Inn Publishing is gearing up to publish a new piece of work coming. Not exactly. We still haven't hammered down a date yet, a launch date yet, but it's the manuscript is done. It's edited and should be ready for preliminary reviews shortly. It's L.A. Sykes' new novel, Hard Cold Shoulder, and like I said, no release date yet, but it should be. I'm really excited about it. I've read it and gone through the whole thing with a fine-tooth comb at this point, and I'm pretty excited about it. It's the first book that L.A. Sykes did through Thunder Inn Publishing, which is my publishing company, which was called Through a Shattered Lens I Saw. Was really good. I really enjoyed it. And some of those stories I was familiar with because I've worked with them before, but a really great short story collection. And Hard Cold Shoulder is 10 times better, and it's a short novel. So it's all one. It's not, instead of being short stories, it's all one contiguous piece. So definitely worth checking out when that comes out. Of course, I'll be announcing that on the podcast, especially once we have a date, so you can gear up and save up, and then on the launch date I'll probably run it again and let everyone know too. Another project that's nearing completion is Voyage of the Tereshkova. I mentioned that one in the last couple of podcasts because it's coming up on its final date for funding. That's our Kickstarter project. We have less than 10 hours left to make up about $1,400, and I'm optimistic. I believe that there's still a chance that we can make up that $1,400, and so if you're interested in the project, I'll put the link in the video comment section below, so you can go and check that out and potentially pledge if it sounds like an exciting project to you. So that's there. I'm really excited about Voyage of the Tereshkova. It's a really fun project. Like I said, it's got 10,000 words, a little over 10,000 words worth of original fiction, totally new, set in the universe of both the books, the Cygnus War, the series, the Cygnus War, and the book Minerva, which the two are bridged through a third book called Dark Salvage. So if you're familiar with Cygnus War, Dark Salvage, or Minerva, you'll catch references. It's in the same universe. So it involves a lot of the same characters, and there are even references to Pink Carbide in there. So if you're a fan of Pink Carbide, you might consider getting in on this project during the next 10 or so hours. Get out there, do it. I got the link in the thing, so feel free to pass along the word too. Not only is it a little over 10,000 words worth of original fiction to read, written by yours truly, but it also has the primary reason for putting it out through Kickstarter is that the biggest part of it is a game, in a sense. Well, not in a sense, it is a game. It's a card game. I refer to it as a space exploration card game, which is a pretty cool concept. Basically, you have your ship, the Tereshkova, with the characters who are, you find all about when you read the fiction that's packaged with the product, and you read the fiction. You get the background on the Cygnus War universe, you get the background on the characters, and each of the characters has their own little special abilities, and the ship, you have a chance at any time to, your ship is going out and exploring space beyond the rim of the Terran Commonwealth. The Terran Commonwealth being the sort of human, the human supernation, as it were, a star-spanning supernation that's out there. Anyway, so you're beyond that. You're beyond the rim of the Terran Commonwealth, exploring deep space, and you'll turn over situation cards and planet card. Well, planet cards. It's like each turn you turn over a planet card. There's a planet, with a survey credit value, and essentially that's how much your commission is from colonial authority for charting the planet. So you'll draw a planet. There's information about the planet right there, the credit value, and ranges from, I think, 20 is the lowest to 100 being the highest. 100 being, just the most pristine, perfect world ripe for colonization. 20 being basically a chunk of icy rock. Might be good for miners, maybe. So after you've drawn your planet card, you set that aside. That's your base. It has your base survey credit value on it, and then you draw a situation card next. When you draw the situation card, there are two types of situation cards. One of them is a condition. One of them are the condition cards, and the other one is listed as situation. But condition cards modify that credit value. So you might draw, a perfect world, perfect full 100 credits, and then draw the condition card that modifies that up a bit or down slightly or up slightly, depending on, there's a number of these condition cards, and they range from things like geologically unstable planet, which kind of lowers the value of the world. It might be the perfect, most pristine world, but if it's always having earthquakes, then people are not going to be quite as excited about colonizing it as they were if it was tectonically stable. Things like that. I've always loved tide-locked worlds. The idea of one side bakes, one side freezes. So that's a condition card. Things like that. Exotic life forms that because they're so unique, they add to the value of the world, sort of as a zoological curiosity. These kind of things. So any condition cards are resolved that way. They modify the value of the planet, and then situation. Then the other types of cards, they say, so it'll modify. Condition card will modify the value of the planet. Then, so you take that into account. You set it aside. You draw another situation card. If you drew a condition card first. And you draw another situation card, and it will either be another condition card modifying the value further, or it will be a situation. And the situations that come from the situation deck range from, there's nothing here. There's only one card that's like that out of a deck of 70 some odd situations, if I remember correctly. Don't quote me on that count, but there's quite a few situation cards. That's the bulk of the deck. And so you'll go through and and you'll draw your situation card, and some of them are like, no survey value for this planet at all. You don't get any credits for this world because it's already been colonized, and who it's been colonized by depends on the card. It could be that it never got recorded that a generation ship made its way out here, and there's people already here. There's humans already colonizing this planet, or maybe it's a pirate haven and you've got to beat feet to get out of there, or you can fight them if you want to, but depending on the state of your ship. Because that's another thing, is that as you explore more worlds and encounter more alien species and find more stuff and pick up more rare metal tokens and stuff like that, you will eventually get access to sort of salvage technology, which you think of as upgrades on your ship, and you might run across that pirate haven, early in the game, and think, "Oh my goodness, I'm gonna get the heck out of here." You might run across it later in the game, once your ship is just totally studded with weaponry, and you might think, "Hey, this might be worth it. Let's fix a problem." That kind of thing. So it's it's open-ended like that. You can make decisions. Pretty much every card has 2 or 3 or more decisions on it that you can make based on the situation, based on what you want to do. And if you get drawn into combat, even then you can choose to run away. Not immediately. You have to wait for your star drive to sort of recover. But you can always dodge enemy fire until it's ready to go, and then you can jump out of there and head to the next world. And sort of once each turn is resolved, or you visit a world, and then then you know, get the condition and situation cards and you resolve those, you'll either be destroyed, you know, which happens in the game, or you'll be successful, you'll survive the situation, maybe even be better off in terms of the state of your starship by the end of it. So, and so if you're still alive at the end of sort of charting the next planet, each planet as it were, you're given a choice after charting each planet to sort of bug out, and if you want to, and head back to the Commonwealth in a sense. Because the point of the game is to get as high a score as you can, get as many survey credits as you can, but through smart dealing and luck. You know, there is chance involved, like all good games in my opinion, but there is a certain amount of skill and planning also involved. You know, you don't go and storm the pirate den without any weapons, that kind of thing. That's just one example. There are many cards and many different situations where you'll be forced to choose between, you know, potentially sacrificing a crew member. He might even live, you know, which can cost you down the line too. You know, in a situation where you have to put a crew member in danger, he may or may not live. If he lives, you know, great, you get a reward. If he doesn't, great, you still get a reward, but you're short one crewman. And what if the next mission he would have been the one that would have saved your ship? You know, stuff like that. Part of it's skill, part of it's planning, part of it's luck. It's interesting, and it's a lot of fun to playtest. It's been a lot of fun to playtest. And I say on the Kickstarter that it's basically for unlimited players, and the reason why it's for unlimited players is because like I said, the point is to get as high a credit value as you can without your ship getting destroyed. So, you know, you're charting planets, you're getting, and you know, you collect precious metal tokens, those count towards your final score. You have a reputation that goes up or down depending on the choices you make through the game. Your reputation affects your total score as well. So the idea being, get as high a score as you can without dying. You know, so it's sort of, that's part of the skill. You figure out when is the best time to bug out, and when is the best time to continue on and take that extra risk. Each planet being a risk. You know, how many risks can you take? And there are cards in there that shuffle the decks randomly, so it's not like, oh, we got through the pirate den, we'll never run across that again. No, because the next card might be the card that shuffles all the decks, and you might get it the very next turn, you know, stuff like that. So it's not really something that you can card count and prepare for per se. Every game is different. There's a lot of interesting little mechanics like that I've worked into the game to keep it interesting and keep each game unique. And like I said, it's for unlimited players because you can play it one of two ways with multiple players. You can either and the set that I've put together includes everything, or like the components for the ship can be copied really easily, and I even encourage people to copy them. So if you want to play with a friend or with multiple friends, you just have to copy the ship. That's all. The components for the ship, which is just almost nothing. You know, make copies of it, set those aside. You know, use those. Each person has their own Tereshkova, and then you just draw from the same deck. Or if you don't like drawing from the same deck, if you have like 10 people who are playing at once, you know, there's even a note in there that says if you want to make doubles of the cards of the set, feel free. Once you've purchased it, I don't care how many copies you make, you know, as long as they're for your set, and you're not just like making copies and handing them out at the comic book store. Here you go, here's a free game. You know, I'm not really worried. I don't think people would do that, but you know, that's what I mean. I'm really open-minded and really open-ended about this game. There's even a section in there about, I'm really into the idea of fan expansions. I'm a huge fan of, in my own life, of making modifications of games like Talisman, or the old Star Wars CCG that was put out by Decipher. In high school, I made 1,200 cards or thereabouts, for the that were fan expansion cards that I made for my use, for personal use, in games against my friends, based off of the Star Wars CCG. And that was a lot of fun because, you know, I liked the mechanics for the Star Wars game that Decipher put out. They were really great, really interesting mechanics, simple but effective. and was really into that game in high school. But I was also into other things. I was also into BattleTech. I was also into Star Trek. I was into the Alien franchise, and I thought, how cool would it be to be able to have all of these things wrapped up together in one game system? And so that's what most of the fan expansions I made for my use for the Star Wars CCG is these different sci-fi things that I'm into. So suddenly, Luke Skywalker versus the alien queen, while Captain Picard does a trench run, in some sort of battle mech from the BattleTech universe, and a rifleman, say for example, Captain Picard and a rifleman, or a Veritech from Robotech doing a trench run on the Death Star. Now, there's an interesting idea, huh? That kind of stuff. And for the Talisman, I worked in some sci-fi stuff and some fantasy stuff. And there's a great website out there called Talisman Island. It's talismanisland.com, and they have a ton of awesome expansions. I swear I've probably got every single one of them at this point, and seen and looked at and play tested every single one of those expansions at this point. But anyway, so with Voyage of the Tereshkova, I've really opened it up and said it with a note in there, hey, fan expansions are totally cool. If the project goes, I have another expansion called Row Fleet, which is already in the works. But if it doesn't go, I might not, and I know I'm not saying this to be an ass, but I might not be interested. It'll be put on sort of towards the back burner with Gasoline Dorado and a few other projects that, I was really excited about in the past. I might pick up again at some point in the future. Row Fleet will kind of go on that back burner pile if Voyage of the Tereshkova doesn't go through the Kickstarter. I mean, there's no reason to really put any time and effort into something that no one's going to buy, is kind of the mentality behind it. I know I said this last time, but I'm trying to focus on projects that people could potentially get into, things that are fun and people would potentially be willing to buy, these sorts of things. But anyway, so fan expansions, definitely am a fan of fan expansions. So there's, like I said, there's a whole note in Voyage of the Tereshkova that talks about how if you're interested in making a fan expansion for Voyage of the Tereshkova, that's totally cool. If you make it, I would dearly love it if you would send me a copy, and I will, if I like it enough, which is, I like a lot of fan expansions. I'm a sucker for fan expansions. But if you send me a fan expansion that you made for Voyage of the Tereshkova, if it goes, I'll probably host it on my site, so other fans of Voyage of the Tereshkova can play the unofficial fan expansions as well. So that's kind of a cool thing. I know that I popped out in the middle of explaining the whole multiple player thing, so I'll go back to that real quick. With Voyage of the Tereshkova, you can either play it sort of and take turns with the existing deck, like you can take all the components that come with the game, and you've got your deck, you've got your ship, you play until you die or until you bug out, write down your score, then hand all the components over to your buddy. Total playtime for this game is like 5 or 10 minutes. Usually most games are 5 or 10 minutes, because you're just, it's draw a planet card, draw a situation card or two, depending on what the situation card says, resolve any combat, and bam, bug out or keep going. And most people only go through about, with the play testing, is about 12 to 15 planets before they either bug out or are destroyed. Some missions are much shorter. Some missions are like 5 planets long. The ship gets so beat up, or that the person says screw this and bugs out, or the ship gets destroyed or does really well. I mean, there's a number of things, but it's usually pretty quick. So you can run your mission. The other person's watching, cheering you on, sort of learning the system, right? Then when you're done, you write down your score. You pass all the equipment over to him, all the components over to him or her. They run through. They write down their score. They hand everything back. If you're looking at two players, 3 players, you can send it around the table. 4 players. If you're looking at more than 4 players, if you're looking at 5 players, 10 players, 1,000 players, however many people you're doing, you're putting into your gaming group, then you might want to start, especially if you're playing simultaneously. If you're taking turns, you might want to, make copies of the materials so that you can sort of expand upon that. Because if you want two people to play simultaneously and take one turn after one another, that's totally doable. The game was originally designed to be played in such a way that you can either play it solitaire or you can play it with friends. And in order to do that, it has to be built in such a way that you can play it solitaire and then hand the components over to your buddy, and he plays it solitaire while you watch, and then he hands it back. You know what I mean? Or you make copies of the material yourself, because if I included enough copies of everything for everyone to be able to play, then suddenly not only does that bump up the amount of sort of required players, you have to have special instructions that say, okay, set these cards aside or set those cards aside. It makes it more difficult for solitaire play, and that was the main idea behind this. Was ideally, I sort of when I've played it, when I've done play testing, the idea is you're playing it, you're playing a run through. That's your in a sense you could think of it as a turn. You're cycling through planets, situation cards, rewards. Planet, situation card, reward. Eventually they're being destroyed or bugging out. You could see that process as a singular turn, and the next turn being your buddies run through like that. You know what I mean? When I was a kid, one of the things that I really enjoyed was we had part of it comes out of the fact that I like the idea of people being able to play games. I work from home. I spend a lot of time at home, and I've always had fun with some of these solitaire games, or games that are designed so that you can play them solitaire. That way you're playing against the game. And I've always thought games where you play against the game are fun, because then you don't have to play against someone who's your friend. Like when you're playing chess or Battletech, for example, or something like that, someone has to be the bad guy. Like with, Robotech, for example, this Robotech Kickstarter thing that I've been watching so close. When you play this game, someone's got to be the Zentradi. And if no one wants to be the Zentradi, that sucks. Or also, sometimes people get hurt feelings and stuff like that. I've got a friend or two that are difficult losers. I'll just leave it at that. And I know that when I've been stressed out in the past, I've been a little bit grumpy when I lose. And so why not design a game that you can play against the game, or against the game, and somebody's watching your 5 to 10 minute sort of super turn, as it were, and then it's their super turn and you watch. When I was a kid, we had one gaming system, and we used to watch. We all had games that we liked to play, but each one of us had a different game that we liked to play, and we would watch the other people playing the game all the way through, and then we'd hand over the controller. I mean, it sort of comes from my experience there. My friend Spencer, we all used to camp out with food, and watch him play Resident Evil 2. And the guy had played Resident Evil 2 so many times that he would do speed runs, and we would watch him do a speed run through Resident Evil 2 while we ate. And then he'd hand over the remote to my friend, or the controller to my friend Randy, and Randy would play Mario, Super Mario Bros, and just do a speed run the same way, And then we'd hand over the remote. They'd hand over the remote to me. I keep saying remote. They hand over the controller to me. And we'd pop in Half-Life, and I'd do a speed run on Half-Life. Stuff like that. And it was fun because, when you're playing it, it's interactive, but when you're watching it, it's like your friend is the star. And so I've kind of tried to work this dynamic into Voyage of the Tereshkova as well. People could get real nitpicky and say, well, it's only a one-player game because there are individual turns within each person's, quote, turn. But you know what? I don't know. I tend to see it as a multiple-player game. I really do. And like I said, for one player or for an infinite number. And one of the things that I have on my to-do list if the project goes, is plugging in a form where people can put in their total score for their run in the game. And then, so in a sense, you can play it, you're alone at home, you play it at home, you tabulate your score when you bug out, at the end of the mission, because if you die, you get 0 points in the game. But you bug out at the end of the mission, you tabulate your score, you can fill out this little form online that I'm envisioning, I've done these kind of forms before. It's probably just going to be like an easy Google form or something where you just type in your handle that you want to be known under and your score, and it will be visible to other players. And so in a sense, you'll be playing a game solitaire at home alone, but the game itself will have potentially an unlimited number of players because you'll be competing to get a higher score than anyone else in the world, in a sense, who has this game and who is playing it. So, kind of bringing. I mean, I like video games a lot. I have a hard time wrapping my brain around programming for them. So, I also like card games and games with miniatures and stuff like that. And so this kind of Voyage of the Tereshkova kind of gave me a way to combine that love and make it work with the tools that I know how to use. So, while I might not be able to make a Flash game, that along the same lines, that has all the same things like a card-based Flash game. I've seen some of those. Those are kind of interesting to me. I'm not sure what I think about them. But, like an electron or digital edition of Magic the Gathering, for example, stuff like that. While I could, in theory, put enough effort and money and maybe work with people to create something like that of Voyage of the Tereshkova, when I look at the investment that it would require in terms of new technology that I would have to learn how to use, and the end result based off of my ability to draw with sprites, pixels essentially, we're talking a project that would probably take a year. And what's the return investment going to be? The return investment on something like that, it's pretty clear through the Kickstarter on so far for Voyage of the Tereshkova that it might not go anywhere, and so that would be an entire year sort of flush, instead of just a month or so, of hard work that might go somewhere in the future, and who knows, maybe after the Kickstarter is over, say the Kickstarter doesn't go, we're down to the last less than 10 hours. It might not go. If it doesn't go, who knows? I'm still the draft copy of the game, the play tested version it's pretty much ready for launch. The main problem is that it requires printing, it requires inventory, and that's where the cost comes from. Most of that cost, the $2,000 that is set up for this project, is for the actual sort of the printing, the inventory, that is required to make this game work, and and so basically that's what the Kickstarter funding is. And I might find a way to, because we're talking about a lot of cards here. We're talking about well nigh on over 100 cards, and that takes a lot of money to set up and print and create a game like that. It really does. And I think that the $2,000 I've set up is a pretty conservative estimate for what it's going to cost to bring it into being. Regardless, my point is with $2,000 and a month, I can put together a project that utilizes the things that I know how to do well, which are things like the designing of the actual game cards, and working with photographs that I've taken over the years with my camera. I've done a lot of work doing covers for Thunder and Publishing, and that after a while I've sort of developed a pretty good sense of what looks good graphically speaking. So there's a lot of that went into it. There's a lot of a lot of experience that went into how to make card games work. I mean, as somebody who made, uh, you know, 1,200 Star Wars cards and over 1,000 talisman cards for personal use for fan expansions, in order to do that, in order to create cards that are interesting and not just repetitions of one another, you really have to be able to get into the guts of a game. And that is something that I love doing. I mean, I was never really into math until I discovered card games. Like not just not like poker, but card games and games that utilize cards, and sort of especially games where it's you against the game, where it's PvE, they say in some video games, PvE, player versus environment. For me, that is where the math gets fascinating. Where are the loopholes? It's almost like law in a sense, because the game is like the law books, and if you've got to look for the loopholes so that you can make things interesting. You know what I mean? When you open up the guts of a game and you study all the cards that are associated with it, you study what they do, how they affect gameplay in the short run and the long run, and you compare that and you think, well, how can I change this, or how can I get around this? How can I have this card interact with this other card? What's the chance that both cards are going to be drawn? How is this card going to interact with this particular character class versus that character class? Is this going to give this guy an unfair advantage, or is it going to cripple this other guy? How quickly is the game going to end if I introduce this element? How quickly is it going to end if I don't? There's a lot of, how can I take the existing rules and make the game itself sort of bend itself sideways into a pretzel or whatever, in such a way that makes the players go, whoa. These are the kind of things I find it absolutely fascinating. The most fascinating use for math, in my experience, is board games and card games. And so looking at these, dissecting them, and making all of these fan expansions, I thought at one point, I decided a long time ago, what the heck am I doing spending all this time making fan expansions for other people's games when I could be making my own games? And that's where one of my previous projects, the Cygnus War ITSG, immersive tactical simulation game, came from. That was I got tired of well, I didn't get tired of it. I got tired of wasting the time making expansions for other people's games, things that wouldn't sell, when I thought I should be creating my own products. And so I thought, well, if I'm going to create my own products, then I got to create something interesting. And so I thought, well, I'll make a game based out of the Cygnus War, because one of the things I absolutely love about the Cygnus War is that sort of space dogfighting, as it were. And there have been games that do dogfighting and they do it well, and games that do space, conflicts and do it well as well. But so I thought, well, I studied a lot of these games, and I've played a lot of them over the years, and they're different mechanics. And I thought, okay, what can I change? What can I do when I create my game that makes it different from all these other games? I don't want to just make a facsimile. I don't want to make an exact duplicate of Aero Fighters or Battle Space or Wings of Victory, Wings of Glory. One of the there's a ton of them. I can't think of all of them off the top of my head, but I've played at least 6 or 7 different dogfighting games in my life. And years ago when I was working on the Cygnus War ITSG, I thought, how can I make this different from all these other dogfighting games? And so I put a lot of effort into making the system, the actual system, the guts of the core of the game, different from all these others. Because the fiction and the fluff, that's what they call it in the gaming community, the fluff is all just window dressing. Its actual purpose is only to sort of disguise the guts and make the game interesting. When you you strip away all the fluff, then you get to the really interesting parts, the working components. And the working components for the Cygnus War ITSG, they're designed purposely to be fun, be interesting, because I like rules. When I create these systems and things like that, I work to very consciously to make the rules interesting, surprising, make them rely as much upon luck as upon skill. They have to be interesting. Things have to be able to turn around in a second. You might be doing really well in a dogfight, and then knock off a couple shots that don't work, make two stupid decisions, and next thing you know, the other player's got his fighter on your tail, and you're done for. These kind of things, making it interesting, making it where it's sort of depending on skill. Of course, it's still pretty much anybody's game. If you're good and you're lucky, you're definitely going to win. If you're good and you're not lucky, you can still pull a win. If you're not good and you're not lucky, well, maybe next game, right? It's really interesting. So, creating like the Cygnus War ITSG, I spent a lot of time. The rules have to be quick and easy to learn. One of the biggest problems I came across as a young man when I was in high school. When I was in high school, working on fan expansions and also doing a lot of. When I was in high school, I did a lot of D&D, Dungeons and Dragons. That sounds like a drug reference. Yeah, when I was in high school, I did a lot of D&D. Oh yeah, those are the days. Oh man, I remember those D&D fixes. Oh yeah, we used to go. Oh man, we used to go down to that alley down there on Washington Street. Go in the back room with a broadsword. Oh, you start rolling those dice. You hear those dice rolling. Oh man, you stick out your arm, man. You stick out your arm. You got the dice in your hand, man. You throw those dice, and you get a natural 20, man. You get a natural 20. Oh, nothing sweeter than a natural 20, man. I did a lot of D&D in high school. And one of the main problems that we ran into with the group was rules. You have to have a lot of time on your hands to learn the rules of a game like D&D without constantly referring back to the rule booklets. And if you're always referring back to the rule booklets, then Dungeons and Dragons is no more fun than cramming for a law exam. And then you have sort of rules lawyers who say things like, well, wait a second, you can't do that. You can't do that. No. Second edition player's handbook clearly states that when a thief does this with traps, he has to roll this, or this happens, and your dexterity is clearly lower than, this. I got tired of dealing with that kind of stuff. And, I think that my players got tired of dealing with it too. And there's only so much of that stuff that you can commit to memory without feeling sort of useless. Well, what are you good at? Well, I've got all of the player's handbook for 3rd edition memorized. Oh, well, great. You can put that on your resume, and maybe they'll give you a job at WizKids. I don't know. So sort of approaching it from a realist angle and realizing that big, complicated tomes of rules doesn't ever, in my experience, equal fun. What equals fun, what ended up equaling fun, especially as me and my friends passed into adulthood, started going to college, stuff like that, were rule systems that you could learn like that. All right, you do this, you do that, you roll the die, you're done. Okay, we know how the system works, let's go. Too simple and it becomes boring because there's no room for playing around. There's no loopholes to exploit. There's no ways that, the simple existing, one paragraph set of core rules can be bent in such a way that, there's a spectacular finish where the guy you thought was going to lose suddenly wins. You can't do that if the rules are too simple. So what do? Well, you design a basic system, you tinker with it, you try to open it up, and you try not to open it up too much. You don't put in too many asides, but you do find ways to open it up and make it interesting for essentially unlimited replay, these sorts of things. So I cut my teeth on the ITSG. That was an experiment, and it's it sells fairly well, so people must like it to some degree. And I also sort of working with what I have and what I know, designed it so that everything is there in one book. You buy the book, and you've got the whole game. I think the only thing you have to do is go down to the supermarket or the dollar store and pick up some six-sided dice and maybe some pencils. That's it. Everything else is in the book. There are even counters that you can cut out of the pages. Now, granted, don't play in a windy area because all your counters will blow all over the place. But it even includes counters that you can cut out, and I think there's even maps as part of it too, which you can play on, and move your pieces around on, and stuff like that. So I mean, it was a lot of fun to put together, and it gave me the confidence to work on other projects like Voyage of the Tereshkova. Now, Voyage of the Tereshkova is not my only other project that's a game that I've worked on, but it's one of the few that runs according to its own mechanics and is released. I've got 4 other projects in process that have been in process for the last 4 years. Some of them I came up with this summer or this spring. Some of them I came up with years ago, but I have a number of those. And then also I have the different role-playing resources, like the universal role-playing resource, planets, which gives you a series of planets to add to your sci-fi game, whatever the genre is. It doesn't matter what the genre, or not the genre. It doesn't matter what the system is. You could be playing Palladium's Robotech. You could be playing the Traveler system. You could be playing. Goodness, those there. I know there are tons more, and I own tons more. But those are the only 2 that are popping into my head at the moment. But these different systems. Say you're running a campaign, you have like one starship or multiple starships, these different characters who are playing and whatnot, and say you run out of material, or you get bored, or you get tired, and or you just need a quick planet. You have a whole adventure set up, and your players go, well, we don't want to go to that gas giant. We want to go over there. That looks interesting. And you don't have anything detailed for that other system that they want to go visit. So you pull out the universal role-playing resource book for planets, flip through the pages, find the planet that looks interesting to you, that and they've got the full social thing. They've got all the information you need about the planet, about the people on the planet, about resources that you can get at the planet. There's even a little picture of the planet, and there's I can't remember whether it's 100 or 200. I don't have the readout in front of me at the moment. But there's quite a few in there, more than enough for people than you would probably ever use in gameplay, depending on how much time you have on your hands. I don't have enough time on my hands to use them all, but so that was. These different universal role-playing resources are things that I've created that aren't aligned with a particular system, but rather give you materials you can use with any system. Whether you're playing Cortex or Savage Worlds or Pathfinder, say you run a sci-fi game using the Pathfinder system. It's not impossible. I used to run sci-fi games with a modified version of Dungeons and Dragons 2nd edition. God, I loved 2nd edition all the way through high school and the first part of college. Me and my guy friends used to play 2nd edition because we knew the system, and it just was a hop, skip, and a jump to modify it to run, cyberpunk or straight up hardcore sci-fi, things like that. And so depending on what system people run, you can utilize this book with any system because it doesn't have any stats, or if it has stats, they're very basic. And they fall into a standard like 4 to 6 different values for each stat kind of thing, like low, medium, high. And so you can go, well, I'm playing 2nd edition D&D, so the maximum human strength for an ordinary human, well, maybe not ordinary, but you know what I mean, a non-godlike human, is 18. So if this guy is a human and he's not a god or a giant, and he's got a high strength in this universal role-playing resource, then I'll give him probably a 17 or an 18 for strength. If his strength is listed in the role-playing resource as godlike, then he's probably somewhere between 18 and 25 in his strength. And that's just for second edition. It depends on what your system is that you're running. They all work. Most of the time that requires no work on your part, like with the planets one. There's the only work on your part is telling the story to your players. But with the ones that have stats, the only work you have to do is just kind of knowing the system well enough to go, well, in my system, using second edition D&D for example, again, 3 is low, 9 is average, and 18 is high. Knowing these kind of things. So anyway, the role-playing resources, universal role-playing resources. There's that other one that I created in the last or earlier this year. That's called Beyond the Zompocalypse. And that one, the idea is that if you wanted to run a game that happens at any point from the beginning of a zombie apocalypse to sort of a potential recovery, it gives you all the details. It's really in depth. That's one of the things I want to do about it, because I've seen a lot of books that address sort of post-apocalyptic zombie themed gaming, pen and paper gaming, but very few that really get into detail, that really get into depth. I mean, a lot of it, and it's not like to such a degree that it's like, well, it takes you 2.8 hours to dig that hole, nothing like ridiculous like that, but something that's very, what's the word? Very comprehensive. It has everything. Here's different ways that, your players can preserve food. You know what I mean? In a post-apocalyptic scenario, and also it's full of ideas. If your game gets boring and it gets to the point where all your players, say you're the referee, all your players are sitting around farming and hoping the zombies don't chew the boards off of their little trailer home or whatever, wherever it is they're hiding out. That kind of game where all you're doing is farming and you don't have any ability to defend yourself, it can get really boring really quick. Any kind of zombie apocalypse game or anything like that where you have to sort of get by on your wits to survive can get really boring really fast, because it's boring enough to try to sort of feed yourself in the real world, and to do that stuff, but then to play a game, that's one of the reasons why I think why games that there hasn't been any games that I've heard of, at least none that I've seen that are popular, that simulate what it's like working in an office environment. I mean, give it 200 years and they might have cubicles and copiers, instead of Dungeons and Dragons, and all the emphasis will be on office drama. I don't know, but we don't do that, or at least it's not wildly popular. I'm sure there is a system like that out there, but it's not something that they're going to make an MMO out of anytime soon, because of the fact that it's boring. It's part of everyday life, just like a lot of stuff that I've seen people do in Dungeons and Dragons would be boring in feudal Europe, because I've seen people get all excited about, my guy is going to go on an adventure just as soon as he finishes planting the turnips. Okay, roll a die for the planting of the turnips. Can you imagine how boring this would be to somebody from that period? Well, why would I sit around and talk about rolling a die to plant turnips when I could just go out in my yard and plant turnips? And I'm getting off track, but basically, the idea being that Beyond the Zompocalypse would be a resource that would keep your zombie apocalypse games from getting totally boring. How do you break out of that? We're farming to survive, and every day we check the plastic, that filters the water, or not filters, but evaporates the water out of our urine and funnels it into a bottle. You know what I mean? That can get very boring very quickly. And so, but when you think about it off the top of your head, what else is there to a zombie survival you know, game like that, like a pen and paper game, other than just surviving. Eventually you're going to run out of food and you're going to have to go in the city. Oh no, there's zombies in the city. That's as exciting as it gets. Now, what if there was a book, and there is, the one that I created. What if there was a book that you, as the game's referee, could look at and thumb through, that would give you all kinds of ideas about the kinds of things your players might run across in this crazy post-apocalyptic world? All kind, and it was meant to be very comprehensive, or the book is meant to be very comprehensive in the terms of in the fact that whether you're running a game where everything is ordinary and then suddenly goes to hell, and the players are caught in the middle of the beginning of a zombie apocalypse, or whether the game is anywhere from there to the distant future, with different types of scenarios and different endings that you can progress towards. It's like, how do you end a game like that? Well, one way to end it is everyone dies and the world continues on without them. But that gets boring after a while, Or the one guy sails off into the sunset, Okay, cool. Well, also boring to some degree after a while. So, what about a situation where, the players get, let's say there's a group of people that prepare for the situation, or that manage to come together and rise up. I mean, not everyone is going to be little camps and or organized raiding parties. If you've played Fallout, the Fallout franchise of games, that there's, in terms of people who've survived the apocalypse, there's the Vaults, there's the Brotherhood of Steel, and the Enclave is another one, for example. There's different groups that have not only survived but managed to do well while surviving. And say a group like that manages to take back a chunk of land where the players are. They cover this in Max Brooks' book World War Z. There's the whole part of that book where they talk about retaking Earth, and that's that kind of idea of retaking the Earth from the zombie infestation is discussed in the book, as well as the way different causes for zombification affect the process of retaking the Earth, if it can be retaken, because depending on the zombie movies or literature you watch, or the zombie literature you read, there are all kinds of different things that could potentially cause zombies, according to the fiction, that would impact the return to normal, as it were, in many different ways. If you want a good example, just compare 28 Days Later and the quote zombies from that film. And I don't say quote zombies to be an asshole. I say it because of the fact that some might say, well, they're not really dead, so they're not really zombies. I think that it doesn't really matter either way, personally. But for the detail sticklers, yeah, they're not dead, but you might want to use them as a template for running zombies, whatever. You know what I mean? So say you've got the difference being like between what causes the zombies from 28 Days Later. It's a bloodborne disease. Okay, Resident Evil. There's another one. The T virus mutates into all kinds of different forms, and affects people through all kinds of different vectors. Then you've got what is what was the name of that movie? Return of the Living Dead, where I can't remember which one it was, but I remember seeing it on late night TV years ago, where you've got the zombie gets put into the cremation facility, and all the ashes and smoke go up in the air and then rain down onto the graveyard, and suddenly you've got dead bodies rising from the graveyard. How do you fight that? These things that even if you cut them all up, they still come after you. Real nightmarish stuff. Depending on you could think about what kind of zombies do you want to put your players against, how do they deal with that, and what are the potential outcomes. And technology too. So for any technology level, it could be a zombie apocalypse. The book will benefit you if it's a zombie apocalypse scenario that happened, in the 1800s, or if it's a zombie apocalypse scenario that happened in the current, era, or if it happened in the distant future. And there's weird things that are mentioned in there too, like say you've got your characters and they run across some group that has been hiding out in bunkers and manages to, they come into contact with them, but they can't find them. They come into contact with their scouts or whatever, so they're there. It's kind of creepy. You don't know what's going on. And then you find out that some isolated group who has access to this old Nazi artifact called Die Glock, and it turns out to be, it's mentioned in the book as being like it's mentioned, the book is told, each section of the book is told by a character. So they're telling you about the rumors, the rumors that are going around in the towns, you know what I mean? And they talk about Die Glock and all the things that it could be, all the things that it could be. It could just be a chunk of metal, man. You might get down in that bunker and you might find out it's just a chunk of metal. That's no fun. You might get down in that bunker and find out it's a Stargate. It goes to other worlds. Yeah, wild, huh? Stuff like that. It's meant to be interesting. It's meant to be open. It's meant for the referee to be able to have as many tools as possible to make as sweet a game as possible. So I've spent a lot of time. I guess my point of sort of going over all these different things I've made is to give examples of all the stuff that sort of led to Voyage of the Tereshkova. And like I said, I have a lot of others that are in progress that I won't mention here, but that I may release in the future. I don't know if I'm going to do Kickstarter again. We'll see how the next 10 hours go. But I've got a number of other games that I could potentially release in the future, which, are interesting and fun in different genres. I've got a couple other Universal Role-Playing resources on back burner that one of them I'm thinking about bringing forward as soon as I finish Liber Vellum Vocus, which is getting close. I'm pretty close now. I'm at 130 pages so far. I was hoping to get it done this week, but I had a lot of other stuff that came up, like editing Lee Sykes' book and being addicted to the Robotech Kickstarter and doing audio work and stuff like that for some awesome podcasts. And the awesome podcasts run by my friend Mark Slade. I did some audio work for those this week. That was a lot of fun. And there was a lot of other stuff that I was doing this week as well that was more like getting the car fixed and stuff like that. But it's been a busy week, so still working on Liber Vellum Vocus. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to get it done next week, because next week's a 4-day week for me. And I'm always uncertain about what kind of work might come in, on the side that would take up my time. And regardless, once I finish Liber Vellum Vocus, I have a couple other projects that I'm thinking about working on. One of them is a science fiction novel that I got to about halfway this time last year. So I'm thinking about finishing that. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to do that this year. Not 100% sure, but pretty sure I'm going to do that this year. And then another one that I have is another Universal Role-Playing resource book that I won't spill any details about here yet, because I don't want to give anything away while it's still in process. But there I am keeping up on. I have more projects that I'm putting together along the lines of the gaming stuff. But Voyage of the Tereshkova is sort of my current fling. It's my current baby, as it were, and I'm pretty proud of how it turned out. And I put a lot of effort into the system itself. So I'm satisfied with what came out of it. I was hoping for a better response on Kickstarter, and I say this full well knowing that by the time I wake up tomorrow evening, it may have been fully funded and then hit a stretch goal. Who knows? I'm optimistic, always willing to welcome abundance from the universe, as it were. So either way, whether it goes or doesn't, I'm going to be happy, because of the fact that I'm proud of the way it turned out and how it came together. I think it's a really interesting system, and it's sort of the synthesis of a lot of time and learning that I've put into creating games over the years, and modifying existing gaming stuff, rule sets and whatnot. So anyway, so Voyage of the Tereshkova, we did a quick breakdown of how play works, and I am going to try to get that out to you guys in some form or another if it doesn't go, but I don't think it'll be anywhere near as cool if it doesn't go. So if it is something that does sound interesting to you, I'd get out there and pledge on the Kickstarter. Even $5 gets you on the special thanks list, so, and I've actually got a backup document where I've listed the names of the people who've pledged. In case it doesn't go, there's still going to be, if the Kickstarter doesn't go, but the project, I can get the project off the ground in some form or another, it is going to come with a special thanks section where I'm going to say thank you to the people who stuck with me until the end and believed in the project even if it didn't go. So there is a backup there. But anyway, so I've talked a bit about current projects and games and stuff like that. As you can probably tell, I've always really been into games. I think it comes from the fact that when I was a kid, I had to invent my own games a lot. My family owned a chainsaw shop, small engine repair place. They did more than just chainsaws. They did lawnmowers and weed eaters and riding lawnmowers and snow blowers and stuff like that. Small engine repair place up in Sonora where I grew up. And my dad was always really busy and working because it's a workplace. And on weekends I'd be there, from 9 to 7, which I think was the hours that he worked. And on weekdays he'd drop me off at school and go to work, and I'd be there. The bus would drop me off at his shop, and I'd be there from about 3 o'clock until about 7. And sometimes my dad worked overtime, because he owned the business. And there was, springtime, everybody wants to cut their lawn, you know what I mean? Regardless, I didn't want to be underfoot, so I spent a lot of time in the basement. It was a 2-level building, and the basement was the same size as the upstairs. It wasn't like some cramped little dungeon, picture, little Earl shut in a closet or whatever. It was nothing weird like that, but it was an interesting place to play as a kid because it was where they kept all the old parts chainsaws. One of the things that kept the cost down was on repairs was that they always had a good stock of used chainsaws and weed eaters and lawnmowers and stuff downstairs that they could that they had accumulated over the years. So someone brings something in, I've had it for years, don't put a new part on it, or well, we looked up the lawnmower and they don't make parts for it anymore, but that's okay because we have one in the downstairs. I'll charge you half price for the part, that kind of stuff. So the downstairs was full of these old parts, and they were, there wasn't. I was told that as long as I didn't break anything, like take a hammer and shatter something unnecessarily, and didn't use anything that was in the small parts section, the section that had all the little things, or any of the new parts. There was a new parts section too. As long as I didn't take any of the new parts or the little parts or break anything unnecessarily, I could do whatever I want with the stuff that was down there. And so I spent a lot of time making my own games and my own, even I guess the term is boffer weapons, costume weapons and stuff like that out of these things. I had a whole array of costume weapons using cheap parts that were left over from different things. Like there was an electric weed eater that I cut the handle off of and I duct taped it to a leaf blower attachment and put a grate from like a rounded metal grate from a lawnmower on the end of that to make sort of this cannon, things like that. And I used to play games. I used to try to work out rules for things, and or I'd get card games. I'd get booster packs for card games because they were cheaper than the core rules, and I would have no idea how to play the game because I didn't have the rules, and I only had like 30 cards, and so I'd make up rules based off of that. I remember picking up, the way I got into BattleTech was I went to go see my mother when I was probably 7 or 8 years old, and she took me to a used bookstore. I've always really been into, big giant fighty robots, stuff like that, even especially when I was a little kid. And we went into this used bookstore, and for $10 they had the original 3025 technical readout for BattleTech. I still own it. I still have it. And I remember seeing it, not knowing what it is, just seeing it sort of as a picture book that had detailed histories and information about these giant robots that were studded with weaponry. And I thought, as a kid, it was perfect. And so I begged and begged and begged and begged. I told my mom I'd take out the trash as much as she wanted, that kind of stuff, until she got me this book. It was like $10. She gets me this book, and I read it from cover to cover. And I traced some of the drawings out of it, and I had a wonderful time, especially since it had, there was that lawsuit that happened between Harmony Gold or whoever it was that owned the rights to Robotech. The Mecha. I don't know if probably none of my listeners are familiar with this, but there was that whole thing where there was some copyrighted Mecha that was in both. It was the same designs in both BattleTech and Robotech, or Robotech's precursor Macross. And so there was this legal ambiguity. Well, who owns the rights to these mecha, these designs? And this book had all these designs. It had designs I recognized from Robotech as a kid, and I just loved it. I pored over it. I thought it was the greatest thing ever, And then I sort of reached a level of awareness and realized that there were stats. And I realized what these stats were, and I started trying to figure out, without having any knowledge of the rules of BattleTech, without having any maps or miniatures, how to create a game utilizing these pieces of equipment, these machines, and their stats. Suddenly you find out that a small laser is 1 ton and does 5 points of damage. And you go, well, what does that mean to me? How can I? This is part of a game. Oh wow, how can I make this work as a game? Using paper and a pen, which is the only thing I had at the time. So I spent a lot of time exploring these kind of things and making up rules and stuff like that. And heck, I used to take a ball peen hammer and pieces of cedar wood, with especially aged ones that had those sections of them that was like that really dry, powdery rotten wood that you can sort of pick chunks. Well, it sounds gross to say it that way, but it's hard and powdery, but it's an area within cedar firewood that's been aged a long time that you can pick out with your fingers, and it's sort of boxy looking, sort of rectangular chunks of wood that are wood. They're solid, or like they're wood in a sense, so they're not mushy or anything, they're dry, but they're probably sap or something, maybe not sap, but like some part of the interior of the log for the tree, that in the aging process becomes so brittle that you can mash it up in your hands and turn it into powder. And so I used to collect these off of the firewood, in the yard, and just make whole armies of these little squares of wood that you could pulverize. And I would take a ball peen hammer, and I would have this intricate set of rules of these different pieces of wood, sort of as machines, starships were firing on one another and stuff like that. And so I've been doing this for a long time, and find it very interesting, the gaming thing. It's always something I kind of go back to. I love writing. I love the game of writing, in a sense. But games themselves will always have a soft spot in my heart, and will always be something that I'll sort of do little bits for here and there. You know what I mean? I'll probably, I don't know what'll happen in the future. Who knows? I'm sure positive things will happen in the future. They usually do. But I think that whatever happens in the future, there will be a part of me that always puts together game utilities or systems or these sorts of things. Even if it's just fan expansions for Talisman. You know what I mean? Stuff like that. So anyway, I've covered a lot of ground tonight, and I think I'm gonna probably wrap it up there. It's 4 a.m. here right now, so I'm gonna go eat. I'm not sure whether it would be lunch or dinner. I suppose it's something closer to dinner. And kick back and work on some other projects. Because that's what I do. I go from project to project. This has been episode 10 of the Midnight Rider podcast. I guess I should explain what I'm having for dinner real quick, huh? I did this cool thing. I fried up some bacon, and then when it got to be just about the right place, I threw it in a wok full of shredded lettuce and shredded onion and some cayenne pepper and some garlic, and fried all that up in a wok. Strained the after I cooked everything in the bacon grease, I strained the bacon grease out. Well, you used a slotted spoon, and then use that to drain the grease, but out of each spoonful. But I've got that. I tried it. It's pretty tasty. I'm gonna go have that for dinner. But Midnight Rider podcast, episode 10. Daniel Chartrand in the opening. I am the Midnight Rider, so called because I write all night and sleep all day. And I hope you have a wonderful day. Don't forget about Voyage of the Tereshkova. Beating a dead horse, I know. Don't forget about Voyage of the Tereshkova. The link is in the comment section, or in the author comment section of this video. And get in on that one. Like I said, like I said in the last episode, if you pledge now and it doesn't go, it doesn't cost you anything. If you pledge now and it does go, you get an awesome game. So it's win-win either way. You know what I mean? So I hope you have a wonderful day and a wonderful evening. And we'll see if I get around to creating another one of these, an episode 11 next week. We'll see. We'll see what next week looks like. Might be real easy. It's looking like it might be easy. But like I said, it's a 4-day week for me because it's my birthday week. Friday is my birthday. Hint, 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 hint. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just messing with you. So have a wonderful day. Wonderful week. Talk to you later.